The morning sky over Kansas should have been painted gold with wheat, but instead, it burned crimson under alien fire. Jake Miller pressed his binoculars against his eyes, watching the massive harvester machines crawl across what had been the Henderson farm just 24 hours ago. The Kef had arrived without warning, their sleek vessels descending like metallic locusts upon humanity's breadbasket. "They're not just taking the crops," whispered Tom Andrews, the local farmer crouched beside Jake in the tree line. "Look at those machines. They're processing everything: soil, roots, even the earthworms." The alien harvesters stood 3 stories tall, their articulated arms reaching deep into the earth with surgical precision. Steam rose from their collection bays as organic matter was sorted, compressed, and stored in gleaming containers that would soon be loaded onto the motherships hovering overhead. Jake lowered his binoculars and keyed his radio. "Command, this is Bravo 7. Confirmed visual on hostile harvest operations. They're strip mining our farmland." The response crackled through static. "Copy that, Bravo 7. Hold position and observe. Do not engage." Tom's weathered hands clenched into fists. "Hold position? They're destroying everything my grandfather built, everything that feeds this country." The Kef had been methodical in their approach. No demands, no negotiations, no declarations of war. They had simply arrived and begun consuming Earth's agricultural regions with the efficiency of a combine harvester. Within 72 hours, they had established control over the Midwest grain belt, the Central Valley of California, and the fertile plains of Argentina. Their strategy was elegant in its simplicity: cut off humanity's food supply, and the species would capitulate within months. Jake had seen the intelligence reports. The aliens possessed technology that could glass entire cities, yet they chose to focus on farms. They wanted Earth intact, wanted its people alive but hungry and compliant. "Movement," Tom hissed, pointing toward the harvester. A group of Kef soldiers emerged from the machine's lower bay. They stood 7 feet tall, their segmented bodies covered in chitinous armor that gleamed like oil on water. Each carried a weapon that resembled a crystal growth more than a gun. Humming with contained energy. The soldiers moved with purpose toward the farmhouse, where the Henderson family had made their last stand. Jake had been too late to save them, arriving only to find the structure partially collapsed and the family's pickup truck overturned in the yard. "Sir," Tom's voice carried an edge of desperation, "my wife and kids are at our place just 2 miles east. When those things finish here." Jake studied the alien formation through his scope. Standard patrol pattern, but they moved with the confidence of a species that had never faced serious resistance. That would be their first mistake. "Tom, you know this land better than anyone. How many access routes to your farm?" 3 main roads, but there's the old mining trail that runs along Copper Creek. Haven't used it in years, but a man could still walk it. The radio crackled again. "All units, be advised. Washington has authorized Operation Last Harvest. Repeat, Last Harvest is authorized." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Last Harvest was the contingency plan nobody wanted to discuss. The plan that would ask humanity to do the unthinkable: destroy their own food supply to deny it to the enemy. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-fi stellar conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring these frontlines to you. Tom must have seen something in Jake's expression. "What is it? What's Last Harvest?" Before Jake could answer, the harvester's engines roared to life. The massive machine began its ponderous turn toward the east, toward Tom's farm, toward his family. "It means," Jake said, chambering around in his rifle, "that we're about to show these aliens what humans do when our backs are against the wall." The Kef believed they understood warfare. They had conquered 14 worlds using the same agricultural siege tactics. But they had never encountered a species willing to burn their own fields rather than surrender them. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to kneel, even if it meant starving in the dark. The war for Earth's soul was about to begin, fought not in the cities or the skies, but in the dirt and grain that had fed civilizations for millennia. Dr. Ellen Ross had never imagined that her expertise in soil chemistry would make her one of the most valuable people on Earth. Now, 3 weeks into the Keth occupation, she found herself in a converted mine shaft 50 feet beneath rural Montana, surrounded by military officers who hung on her every word. "The analysis is conclusive," she said, pointing to the holographic display of molecular structures. "The Keth aren't just harvesting our crops for food. They're extracting specific trace minerals from Earth's soil that their biology requires." General Hayes leaned forward in his chair. "Explain it in simple terms, Doctor." Ellen switched to a different display, showing the alien tissue samples recovered from the Henderson farm battle. Their cellular structure incorporates selenium, molybdenum, and several rare Earth elements that exist in unique ratios only in Earth's agricultural regions. Without these minerals, their metabolism begins to break down within days. Jake Miller, now serving as liaison between military command and the rural resistance networks, studied the data with growing excitement. "So they're not just invading us, they're dependent on us." "Exactly, which means," alarms suddenly blared throughout the bunker. A communications officer's voice cut through the noise. "Hostile harvesters detected. Grid reference 77 Alpha. The Wilson farm is under attack." Ellen watched as the tactical display updated in real time. Red markers indicated Keth positions, while blue dots represented human resistance cells. The aliens were advancing systematically, processing each farm with methodical efficiency. But the humans were adapting. Tom Andrews' voice crackled over the radio from his hidden position near his own farm. "Command, this is Mockingbird. Package. Delivery complete. Repeat. Package delivered." On the display, a small explosion bloomed at the Wilson farm location. Tom's team had successfully planted improvised explosive devices in the grain silos before the Keth arrived. When the aliens attempted to harvest, they would find nothing but charred wheat and twisted metal. "Mockingbird, confirm your status." Hayes replied, "All green, Command. Moving to secondary position. My family's safe in the caves with the others." Ellen felt a mix of admiration and heartbreak. These farmers were destroying their own livelihoods, generations of work and tradition, to deny resources to an enemy they barely understood. Yet they did it without hesitation. "Doctor," Hayes turned back to her, "how long can we maintain this?" "Strategy? Burning our own food supply isn't sustainable." Ellen had been dreading this question. "Current estimates suggest we have perhaps 6 months before widespread famine becomes unavoidable. But the Keth will face biological degradation within weeks if we can deny them sufficient mineral intake." A new voice joined the conversation, Major Lisa Park, recently arrived from the California Resistance. "We've confirmed similar dependency patterns on the West Coast. The aliens attempted to establish a processing facility in Salinas Valley, but when we salted the fields, their equipment began malfunctioning within days." "Salted?" Jake asked. "Ancient warfare tactic," Ellen explained. "High concentrations of sodium chloride poison the soil for crops. The Romans used it against Carthage. In this case, it also disrupts the Keth's mineral extraction processes." The tactical display updated again. More red markers appeared across the Midwest, but the blue dots were multiplying as well. Human resistance cells were sprouting like wildflowers, connected by hidden communication networks and united by a single, desperate purpose. Tom's voice returned over the radio. "Command, we've got visual on a new type of alien machine. Bigger than the harvesters. Looks like it's trying to rehabilitate the Wilson farm." Ellen pulled up geological surveys of the Wilson property. "They're trying to counteract our sabotage. If they can restore soil chemistry, they can resume harvesting. How long would that take them?" Hayes asked. Ellen ran rapid calculations. With their technology, maybe 10 days to fully restore a damaged farm. But every day they spend on rehabilitation is time they're not expanding their harvest operations. Jake smiled grimly. "So we keep them busy. Every farm we burn forces them to choose expand or repair. They can't do both effectively." The communications officer looked up from his station. "Sir, we're receiving reports from resistance cells worldwide. The pattern is consistent. Humans are implementing Scorched-Earth tactics on every continent. The aliens are struggling to maintain their schedule. General Hayes stood and walked to the main display showing global operations. Red and blue markers dotted the surface like a complex board game where the stakes were the survival of human civilization. "The Keth made one critical error," he said quietly. "They assumed we would fight to preserve what we have. They never considered that we might be willing to destroy everything to prevent them from having it." Ellen watched the data streams flowing across her screens. Agricultural output was plummeting, but so were alien mineral acquisitions. It was a race against time who would break first, the invaders or the invaded. Through the bunker's communication system, she could hear Tom Andrews coordinating with other farm families, their voices calm and determined as they prepared to burn their own fields. These weren't soldiers or politicians. They were ordinary people who had chosen to sacrifice everything rather than let humanity kneel. The smoke rising from the Colorado plains could be seen from orbit. Tom Andrews stood at the edge of what had been his grandfather's wheat field, watching flames consume 3 generations of careful cultivation. The fire line stretched to the horizon, a wall of orange and black that marked humanity's retreat from its own heartland. "Readings are optimal." Ellen's voice crackled through his earpiece. "The thermite charges created temperature sufficient to alter soil chemistry at the molecular level. This field will be unusable to the Keth for months." Tom wiped soot from his face and keyed his radio. "Copy that, Doc. Field 7 is complete. Moving to Field 8. Behind him, other members of the resistance emerged from their hiding places: farmers, ranchers, and townspeople who had volunteered to destroy their own livelihoods. Maria Santos carried detonation equipment salvaged from construction sites. Bill Tucker loaded chemical compounds that would poison the Earth itself. They worked with the systematic precision of people who understood exactly what they were sacrificing. "Movement to the east," called Jake Miller from his observation post. "Keth reinforcements, estimated battalion strength." Tom raised his binoculars and spotted the alien formation. Unlike their earlier methodical advances, these troops moved with obvious urgency. Their harvesting equipment showed signs of hasty modification, jury-rigged attachments that suggested desperation rather than the calculated efficiency they had demonstrated weeks ago. "They're hungry," Maria observed, watching the alien machines lumber across the devastated landscape. "Look how they're moving. No more patience, no more careful planning." Ellen's analysis proved correct. Deprived of essential minerals, the Keth were beginning to show signs of biological stress. Intelligence reports described alien soldiers moving more slowly, their once pristine armor dulled and corroded. Their massive motherships had descended lower in the atmosphere, presumably to reduce transport costs as resources became scarce. "Command, this is Bravo 7, Jake reported. "Aliens are attempting to establish emergency harvesting operations on the Morrison Ranch. Request permission to initiate disruption protocols." General Hayes' response came immediately: "Negative. Bravo 7. Morrison Ranch is designated for Phase 3 Scorched-Earth. Civilian teams are already in position." Tom felt his stomach clench. Morrison Ranch represented some of the richest farmland in Colorado, soil that had been carefully maintained for over a century. What they were about to do there went beyond tactical necessity. It was agricultural vandalism on an unprecedented scale, but the alternative was surrender. "Phase 3 teams report status." Ellen's voice carried a tone of forced professionalism across the communication network. Confirmation signals arrived from destruction teams, positioned at crucial agricultural centers throughout North America. Each team had spent days preparing their assigned targets with a thoroughness that would have made military engineers proud. Chemical compounds, designed to alter soil pH, biological agents that would render Earth sterile for years. Controlled burns time to create maximum thermal damage at precise depths. "All teams ready," came the coordinated response. Tom looked at the faces around him: neighbors, friends, people he had known his entire life. These were individuals who had devoted their existence to growing things, nurturing life from dirt and seeds. Now they prepared to undo centuries of agricultural development with the systematic precision of experts. "You know," Bill Tucker said quietly, adjusting the straps on his equipment pack, "my great-grandfather cleared this land with nothing but a mule and determination. Took him 15 years to make it productive." Maria nodded toward the approaching Alien machines. And we're going to make it worthless in 15 minutes. Not worthless, Tom corrected. Poisoned specifically for them. When this war is over, we can fix it. We can rebuild. But first, we make sure there's something left to rebuild. The alien formation had reached visual range. Through his binoculars, Tom could see individual Keth soldiers dismounting from their vehicles. Even at this distance, their movements appeared sluggish, uncertain. Several stumbled as they attempted to deploy their extraction equipment. Phase 3 teams, you have green light, General Hayes announced. Execute Operation Barren Ground. Tom triggered the first charge himself, watching as carefully placed explosives sent plumes of chemical-laden soil high into the air. Across the plains, similar detonations created a landscape that looked like the surface of an alien world scarred, poisoned, deliberately made hostile to life. The Keth machines advanced into this wasteland and immediately began experiencing equipment failures, their mineral extractors clogged with contaminated soil. Their atmospheric processors choked on the toxic particles filling the air. For the first time since the invasion began, alien soldiers retreated. "Command, this is Mockingbird," Tom reported, using his assigned call sign. "Hostile forces withdrawing. From Grid 77 Alpha, repeat, aliens are pulling back." Ellen's voice carried a note of amazement, confirmed across all sectors. Keth forces are abandoning active harvest operations. They're consolidating around their primary landing sites. The implications were staggering. An alien force capable of interstellar travel was being forced to retreat by humans willing to destroy their own agricultural foundation. Jake's observation. Post crackled over the radio. "This is Bravo 7. I'm watching their motherships. They're ascending to higher altitude, probably trying to conserve fuel." Tom surveyed the devastation they had created. Poisoned fields stretched to the horizon. Agricultural wealth reduced to strategic denial. The air reeked of chemicals and burned grain, but for the first time in weeks, he felt something approaching hope. The Keth High Command had never experienced failure on this scale. "Commander," Vex High stood before the tactical display in the primary mothership, watching red warning indicators spread across Earth's agricultural regions like an infection. 70% of targeted harvest areas had been rendered unusable through human sabotage. "Status report," Vex High commanded, his voice carrying the rasp that indicated advanced mineral deficiency. Operations leader, Kuntel moved with obvious difficulty to the central console. "Mineral acquisition rates have dropped to 12% of projected levels. Our forces are experiencing widespread biological degradation. Medical reports indicate we have perhaps 10 days before combat effectiveness reaches critical thresholds." The human resistance strategy had evolved beyond simple Scorched-Earth tactics. Intelligence reports described coordinated strikes that targeted not just farmland, but the entire agricultural infrastructure. Grain storage facilities poisoned with compounds specifically toxic to Keth biology. Transportation networks sabotaged to prevent equipment movement. Even water sources contaminated to deny the aliens any opportunity for biological recovery. How is this possible? Vex High demanded. Our projections indicated humans would prioritize survival over tactical advantage. They should have surrendered. When faced with starvation, Kuntel displayed the latest intelligence analysis. It appears we fundamentally misunderstood human psychology. They view the destruction of their own resources as acceptable if it denies those resources to us. This behavior pattern has no precedent in our database of conquered species. On Earth's surface, the human campaign had reached unprecedented levels of coordination. Tom Andrews crouched in an observation bunker overlooking the Platte River Valley, watching Keth forces attempt to establish an emergency processing facility. The aliens had abandoned their methodical expansion and were now desperately trying to extract sufficient minerals from their existing holdings to maintain basic biological functions. "Command, this is Mockingbird," Tom reported. "Confirmed visual on hostile construction activities. They're building something big at the confluence." Ellen Ross' voice responded through the encrypted channel. "Analysis indicates they're attempting to concentrate their remaining extraction capability into a single facility. If successful, they might be able to achieve sustainable mineral intake." General Hayes cut in. Negative on that outcome. All teams, prepare for Operation Total Eclipse. Tom felt his breath catch. Total Eclipse represented the final phase of humanity's Scorched-Earth campaign, the systematic destruction of every remaining agricultural resource within a 100-mile radius of major Keth installations. It would render vast regions of Earth uninhabitable for years. Sir, Ellen's voice carried obvious concern. Total Eclipse will create agricultural dead zones that could take decades to recover. The environmental impact is acceptable, Hayes interrupted, if it means human independence. Across the communication network, resistance teams confirmed their readiness. Jake Miller's voice came from his position overlooking the alien facility. Bravo 7 ready. We've got thermite charges placed at structural weak points. Secondary team has biological agents prepared for soil contamination. The Keth construction proceeded with obvious desperation. Alien engineers worked around the clock, their movements increasingly erratic as mineral deficiency affected their cognitive functions. The facility they were building looked improvised, cobbled together from salvaged equipment and powered by overloaded energy systems. All teams, stand by for final phase authorization, Hayes announced. Tom checked his equipment one last time. The charges his team had prepared would create a chain reaction of destruction stretching from the Colorado Rockies to the Kansas border. Millions of acres would be reduced to poisoned wasteland, but it would also eliminate the last hope the Keth had for sustainable occupation. Authorization granted, Hayes declared. Execute Total Eclipse. The first detonations began in synchronization across multiple time zones. From orbit, the chain of explosions would have resembled a string of pearls stretched across the continental United States. Each blast sent clouds of chemically enhanced debris high into the atmosphere, ensuring that contamination would spread far beyond the immediate target areas. Tom triggered his assigned sequence and watched as the Platte River Valley erupted in flames. The alien facility, still under construction, vanished in a ball of superheated plasma. Secondary explosions followed as stored materials ignited, creating a firestorm visible from space. Hostile facility destroyed, Jake reported. Confirmed total structural collapse. Similar reports flooded in from teams worldwide. The humans had executed a coordinated global campaign that eliminated the last viable agricultural regions under alien control. Ellen's voice carried amazement and horror in equal measure. Orbital reconnaissance confirms complete success. Every major Keth facility has been neutralized. Their mineral extraction capability has been reduced to near zero. The tactical display showed the results in stark terms. Red markers indicating alien control had been replaced by gray zones areas, rendered uninhabitable by human action. Vex High stared at the updated intelligence reports with growing disbelief. They destroyed everything. Their own food supply, their agricultural heritage, entire regions of their planet. Rather than submit to occupation, they chose mutual destruction. Kuntel's response was barely audible. Sir, our medical teams report critical mineral deficiency across all personnel. Without immediate resupply, we face systematic biological failure within days. The High Commander turned to the navigation station. Plot a course for the nearest supply depot. Signal the fleet for emergency evacuation. For the first time in Keth military history, an invasion force was abandoning a conquest not due to military defeat, but because the target species had chosen to poison their own world rather than surrender it. On Earth's surface, Tom Andrews stood in the middle of what had once been America's breadbasket and was now a toxic wasteland stretching to the horizon. Smoke and chemical haze filled the air, creating a twilight atmosphere even at midday. But in the distance, alien ships were lifting off, retreating toward the stars. The last Keth mothership broke orbit 17 hours after Operation Total Eclipse concluded, its departure trajectory indicating a species fleeing rather than regrouping. Tom Andrews stood on the observation deck of the temporary command center, watching the alien vessel's drive signature fade into the cosmic background. Around him, resistance leaders who had spent weeks destroying their own world now faced the magnitude of what they had accomplished and what it had cost. Orbital reconnaissance confirms complete hostile withdrawal, announced communications. Officer Peters, all Keth forces have abandoned Earth. General Hayes nodded grimly. Signal all resistance cells. Mission accomplished. Begin Phase 4 recovery operations. Ellen Ross pulled up environmental assessments on her tablet, her expression revealing the full scope of the devastation. Preliminary analysis indicates approximately 40% of Earth's arable land has been rendered unusable for immediate cultivation. Recovery timelines range from 5 to 20 years depending on contamination levels. Jake Miller joined them at the observation window. His uniform bore the stains of weeks spent in the field, directing sabotage operations that had turned humanity's heartland into a strategic weapon. Was it worth it? He asked quietly. Tom considered the question while studying the scarred landscape below. Smoke still rose from dozens of points across the horizon where agricultural infrastructure had been systematically destroyed. The air carried the acrid scent of burned grain and chemical contamination. My grandfather used to tell me about the Dust Bowl, Tom said finally. When the soil blew away in the 1930s, people thought farming in Kansas was finished forever. But they adapted. They learned. They rebuilt. Ellen looked up from her environmental data. The Dust Bowl was a natural disaster. This was deliberate destruction on a scale never attempted in human history. But it was our choice, Jake pointed out. Every field burned, every well poisoned, every silo destroyed. We did it ourselves for our own reasons. The communication system crackled with reports from around the globe. Similar scenes were playing out on every continent as human populations emerged from hiding to survey what remained of their agricultural civilization. Command, this is Australian Control, came a voice from the other side of the world. Confirming. Hostile withdrawal from all territories. Keth forces abandoned their positions approximately 6 hours ago. General Hayes responded. Copy that, Australian Control. What's your damage assessment? Significant contamination across the Murray-Darling Basin. Estimate minimum 3-year recovery period for basic crop production. But we're free, sir. We're free. Tom heard similar reports from Europe, South America, and Asia. Everywhere, the pattern was identical. Human communities had chosen agricultural suicide rather than alien occupation. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked. The psychological profile was completely wrong, Ellen mused, reviewing intelligence data. The Keth assumed we would behave like every other species they had conquered, prioritizing individual survival over collective resistance. Maria Santos emerged from the communication center, her face bearing the exhaustion of someone who had spent weeks coordinating destruction on a continental scale. Just received word from the underground networks. Civilian casualties were minimal. Most farming communities successfully evacuated to prepared shelters before implementing Scorched-Earth protocols. And food supplies? Hayes asked. Strategic reserves will sustain population centers for approximately 8 months. After that, double quotes, Maria shrugged. We'll have to figure out how to farm in poisoned soil. Tom watched a convoy of vehicles moving across the devastated plain below. These were the first recovery teams, scientists and agricultural experts who would spend years undoing the damage humanity had inflicted upon itself. The Keth made one fundamental error, he said. They thought our farms were just resources to be harvested. They never understood that they represented something more. Jake raised an eyebrow. Which was? Home, Tom replied simply. You don't surrender home. You don't negotiate with someone trying to take home. If necessary, you burn it down before letting strangers claim it. Ellen's tablet chimed with an incoming priority message. Latest intelligence analysis confirms our assessment. Keth biology requires specific mineral combinations found only in Earth-type agricultural soils. Without access to our farmland, they can't maintain colony operations. So they can't come back? Not unless they're willing to spend decades terraforming another world, assuming they can find one with suitable chemistry. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not merely won a military victory. They had eliminated the fundamental motivation for alien conquest. The Keth needed Earth's farms to survive, but Earth's farms no longer existed in usable form. Command, priority signal from orbital reconnaissance, Peters announced. Detecting additional drive signatures at the edge of the solar system. The observation deck fell silent as everyone considered the possibility of reinforcements. Analysis. INDICATS standby. Confirmed as Keth vessels, but departing the system at maximum velocity. Appears to be a complete species evacuation. Tom felt a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying finally lift from his shoulders. The aliens weren't regrouping or calling for support. They were fleeing. General Hayes activated the global communication network. All resistance cells, all civilian populations, all recovery teams. This is command. I can now officially confirm that Earth has been liberated through the successful implementation of strategic agricultural denial. Across the planet, exhausted human communities received the news that their sacrifice had achieved the impossible, the first successful resistance against Keth expansion in recorded galactic history. What do we do now? Maria asked, gesturing toward the wasteland that had once fed a continent. Tom Andrews, grandson of farmers, leader of agricultural saboteurs, looked out over the poisoned fields and smiled. Now we do what humans have always done. We figure out how to grow food in impossible conditions. We adapt, we rebuild. And if they come back, Tom's smile widened. Then we'll remind them that humans are willing to destroy everything we love before we'll let someone else take it from us. The last alien ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying word to the galaxy that Earth's agriculture was defended not by weapons or walls, but by a species stubborn enough to starve itself rather than surrender. In the end, humanity's greatest victory came not from what they had built, but from what they were willing to burn.